So next to me is Stephanie Zhao. She runs product marketing at Figma. She just started there recently, actually, so this is kind of fun for us because she's going through a lot of these exercises right now, which is very fun. She's previously had similar roles at Zendesk and Intercom, so very successful organizations known for product marketing. This is Dave Shanley. He's a serial entrepreneur who's worked in a lot of B2B SaaS companies. Has been the VP of marketing at JAMA Software. And last but not least, we have Tanya Kakbaz. She's the head of product marketing at Stripe. You've probably heard of them before. And has been at Square for a number of years as well, doing a lot of product marketing there too. So thank you for everybody for joining us. The first question I have really about personas is where we all start. Since you just started your new role, I'd love to ask you first, what do you think about when you're building your first persona, either because there doesn't, one doesn't exist for the company or the product has changed? Like, how do you approach the beginning?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Well, I think for Figma, it's very clear. I think when the product launched, there was a person in mind, and that was the head of design. And so it's still, relatively young company. And so we launched just a couple years ago. So I think that person has been the singular focus for the product teams and for the budding go-to-market teams. So I think that's really important. It's like if you build a product, you stay focused, and even as maybe other folks start using the products, so we have lots of non-designers that use the product, but we still have that laser focus to start and learn from.
How does it scale up? I mean, Tanya, you've got a lot of products to think about. How do you scale up your thought of going from kind of a first persona to growing that over time? How do they evolve?
Yeah, I mean, so, before I joined Stripe, I was at a really, really small startup. We were like 40 people. And I don't, first of all, the word persona has been like a dirty word in almost every company I've ever worked in. Like, I don't ever use that word because I think it's loaded with like, Bob the Builder lived, 10 miles from the whatever, we're talking kind of about that stuff. So I think what the essence of persona segmentation is ultimately figuring out like your customer and the job to be done and the job that they're hiring you for. And so I think like no matter how big you are, no matter how many products, that is like the essence of what it is. So it's like, what is the job you're trying to do for which type of customer? Why are they hiring you? And what is like the true job, right? What are you replacing? And so if anyone hasn't read Clay Christensen's Jobs to be Done article, like it's worth reading. It's kind of a little jargony, but it's really helpful. And so I think that evolves over time for Stripe, definitely is like this core developer who wanted just to quickly take payments on their website. And over time, we have different kinds of developers globally. We have implementers who actually will implement us to, certain websites that exist. And then we'll have the like kind of startup developer. The developer in Atlanta looks really different. Then you have heads of payments, you have business decision makers, and those types of people will have different needs, but ultimately it's just like being super laser focused on like what you're being hired to do.
I'm curious kind of the details that people catalog for personas. There's kind of different things that are important. I think you had some thoughts, Dave, on kind of what you include in those personas, like in the definition of them.
Yeah, coming into JAMA, it was a existing organization, been in business a while. We had those sort of Bob the Builder kind of very shallow, very broad personas. What I wanted to do is equip the organization with a model that we could go execute, that marketing could go execute, that product could map to as we were thinking about new features and the go-to-market. And so it was developing a framework that focused on frustrations and moving people to that conversion event. Right. So if you're not moving people from frustration to what they want and really articulating that down at that buyer, right, or moving their fears to their aspirations and speaking directly to that, I just think if you're not doing that, it's too informational, right? And are you going to get that ultimate goal that you want, which is kind of moving them down the funnel, moving them towards whatever event means a conversion for you at that point for that person. And so really detailing that. And documenting it and then blowing out the messaging associated with that.
Yeah, I mean, I like, part of what you said too is that you're trying to help people accomplish some goal.
Yep.
And the marketing does part of that. It encourages them, maybe kind of shines a light on it. But, there's other people involved, right, in making sure that that can be fulfilled. How do you guys think about how the persona can be used within the rest of the organization? Like, how do teams work together and use this as an artifact?
Yeah, I mean, it is one, you have to have it documented, right? A lot of times you just get tribal knowledge and people walk away with kind of different interpretations of things. And so it is really important, just like on the product side, writing everything down, that you do capture that. And so, we built this out into that framework and then socialized it with folks and made sure that everybody was on board. We had a collaborative effort, to kind of unveil it and refine it, have people distill it down to what those frustrations that we wanted to focus on, because it can be everything, right? Or there can be too many.
Yeah.
It is really refining that focus, getting buy-in organizationally with different stakeholders, folks from marketing, and then running it through and then working with them on how they could apply it. I think there's a lot of thoughts out there on, hey, do this, tactically or things like that, but people struggle with what to do first, how to prioritize that, and how to actually blow things out.
I think it's like the notion of socializing it feels like a little dangerous sometimes, because like, it shouldn't be like marketing has developed this in a room by themselves and they're shoving it down the throats of like the rest of the organization. Ideally, personas or customer segments and people that we're trying to, like the problems that we're trying to solve are actually owned jointly by product and marketing. So it's like a company-wide segmentation or a company-wide who we're tackling. Because if the minute these start becoming fragmented, then you're done.
And you have to believe in that focus,
Yes.
right? Because there's a natural prioritization, because you end up in a situation where there could be many people involved right on the buyer side of the process, but who are we messaging, today?
Have any of you guys worked in environments where kind of interviewing was a regular part of enriching the persona? Have you done that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think talking to customers and non-customers, especially people who may not have chosen your product, or it's like absolutely critical. I think I've been really lucky at, like working a few years ago at Zendesk. It's a very open culture of anyone can just email a customer or call a customer. And I think that's really important just from a company starting out, is that anyone should be able to talk to your customer, but then figure out a way to how do you share it across the company. I'm new at Figma, but one of the things I noticed that they started developing as their way of sharing out is they just have like a simple notes channel in Slack. And so anyone that talks to customers just like populates, like key takeaways. And so there's like a quick summary. So you can just like read the quick snapshot and then dig into the notes later. So just like that, creating that transparency it's really important and empowering. So
That's great. Have you've done some interviews as well on your team?
Research is so we have a centralized user research team that actually sits in design, but every team across Stripe does user research, from engineering to ops to everyone. And I think it's absolutely critical. It's kind of knowing why you win, why you lose, just having that be a part of literally every part of product development. And again, it's not just marketing. It is truly like embedded in product development. I think that's really critical. One of the challenges with as you get bigger and everyone wants to talk to the users is how do you not spam everyone? How do you find them? So I think there are a bunch of hacky things. I've shared this before with folks, but my favorite, especially with going with prospects, is it can be really hard, but you just go to the place where your customer is. So go to conferences and kind of lurk around the dev meetup and ask questions. Go to the airport if you have a finance decision maker. They're trapped. They're sitting there. They will answer your questions. And so it's just kind of just not being shy about it. I think there's often such a big thing. We do win-loss interviews, and we just offer people a bottle of wine just as a small token of thanks for talking to us. And people say yes. Ask them for 15 minutes. They'll say yes. And then 15 minutes is never, everyone always blocks off 30. So you get 30 minutes, just ask, and you'll get to talk to people.
And that's a really interesting, I think, technique to just sort of have a structure around how you conduct it, so that other people kind of pick that up. and do it on their own?
Yeah, totally. And this again starts like in the very beginning when you're in a really small company. I really believe product marketing, growth marketing, product management are the same function.
Yep.
All the same function. And so what I do when I come in is like, okay, who are the addicted users? Like no segment, whatever. Like who are the peeps who are using us a lot? Go find the lovers, find out what is the essence and not what feature, but like why. What is the thing? And then find the people who you think look like those lovers and aren't picking you, and go talk to them and find out why not. And then you start getting some patterns there. And so you do that from the beginning. And when you're small, you can share it out and it's fine. When you get bigger, some of the things we do, we have a win-loss program. So all the product marketers, we split up a list of all of the customers that we won or lost, and we divide and conquer, and we have a kind of like Google group that tracks the notes. So you can make sure if you ever want to reach out to that user again, you have to check this group to make sure they haven't been reached out to. There's CRMs and things for that too. And we share those out, and we quarterly do a synthesis across our team to find out kind of what is going well, what's not going well. And we share notes after every meeting with the whole company as well. So
oh, wow.
Product, we tag them in when we're finding things, sales,
In maybe part of those interviews, or even just in your persona development in general, like what kind of traits, and maybe they're different for each of you, so I'd love to kind of get an idea. What traits do you feel like are helpful in segmenting people who are a good and maybe not good fit? And how does that, kind of change over time? I'll start with you.
Cool. Since I've been thinking about this, because we don't have personas today, it's, product marketing is actually, I'm the first product marketer. And so I've been thinking do we need to actually document personas the last few weeks? I'm like, okay, I think we do. And then who will actually consume them? But in terms of the traits, some things I've been thinking about pretty specifically is the role, what's the role of our buyer? Obviously there's head of design, but design has actually changed quite a bit over the last couple years. There is the rise of the design ops person, and then there's design systems. That has become a big practice. And so that can be the same person at certain companies, but they can be two very different people that work closely together. So that's been really interesting, right? It's okay, who are they, and what do they, what's their goal? Because their goals are very different if they're two different people. I think the company size, some of the basic organizational facts actually do matter for us. I think you have to be kind of a large enough company to have a design team. So I think that does, those little attributes do matter. Another, there's softer traits like culture, right? I think one of the value props of the product is having a very open design belief. And so what are the types of companies that embody that? And so those are some things I've been thinking about. Not formalized yet, but those are the things swimming in my head.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What are some of the traits that are important for you?
Yeah, I mean, for us, in previous roles at previous companies, there's been a clear indicator of who the buyer is and its customer, and we're serving the customer of our customer. So it's really working the buyer's journey backwards and thinking about all the people that are involved in that. At Jama, because it's so horizontal, the application is used by many different product-oriented teams and people interested in very detailed change management. That it's actually more around, and it's startups through to very large enterprises. And so it's really distilling down what are markers of that they're going to be successful. They have to be invested in a process. They have to show signals that they are already doing some things, that they are investing in the concepts and the process that are going to map over into our software to be successful. So I think that's interesting to dig into, because that's even relevant, I think, in earlier stages if you have a more horizontally applied platform or application.
It's almost like qualifiers.
Yes, you definitely want to qualify people out. Even if you're running just a straight inbound oriented funnel. Right,
yeah,
don't have a sales team.
This is the point I think that's often lost, I think, for some folks, because maybe sometimes when you're creating the first persona, you want the biggest pool of people in the world, all develop people with computers is maybe not the best persona, right? So it's all about, you can become more focused in your messaging only once you have a group that you really can speak authentically to. How do you
And
think about
that's
that?
like hard to do that,
Yes,
to
it's
say,
hard.
because it takes discipline and it
Mhm.
takes alignment, and it means that you're saying, like, you're literally
no,
leaving
yeah.
things on the table, and people
Mhm.
can be really scared to do that. But then it's just confusing if you're not clarifying.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think one example for Stripe, we launched Stripe Terminal recently. And I don't know if people know, but
Yeah.
basically, yeah, it's like ability to extend your online point of sale to offline. It is not Square, like where I used to work. Not for like SMB coffee shop with no developers to come kind of get the app and like start using it. It does not have an app. You actually need to be a developer to use it, or have technical capabilities. So for us, it was like when we launched that, gotta like put code all over the place
Yeah.
on that thing. Be like, you're gonna have to do work. And I mean, people still, and you kind of like try to make sure that people are qualifying throughout the whole process, but it can be very hard because there's a category that exists with a very different customer, or the SMB customer who just buys the thing off the shelf. And so, we were very clear in our marketing and our comms positioning, et cetera, to like make sure it's clear that this is developer tool.
Right.
Similarly, when we launched Stripe Issuing, which is the ability for developers to like programmatically issue cards, like we are not ourselves giving you a debit card from Stripe. So like, how do you communicate that in a way that's like, don't sign up for a card with Stripe right now, right? And so how do you do that and make it like friendly and accessible, but like very clear who it's for? So that is like signposting that you really have to do.
Yeah.
Which most people I don't think match with the personas, because they're mostly focused on who they want versus the the anti-pattern of who they don't want and who will probably show up.
Yes.
Right.
Because they
I mean-
read the TechCrunch article
Right.
and they're like, oh, cool. Yeah.
I mean, how do you, maybe there's a habit sometimes people have of, people that said no to the product. That must mean there's a secondary persona somewhere, right? Which is not maybe the best, answer. So I'm kind of curious for each of you, how many personas is the right number? Do you think about it in terms of products, markets? If we think about it in segments, maybe it's a little bit easier. But you mentioned a couple. Do you think about personas as just your champion, or do you think about them as the buyer also? Like, what's the right number for you starting out?
Well, for me right now, it's one, and I hope it's going to be one for a long time. I think it's good to always have a primary, even if you have multiple secondaries. I think that provides a lot of focus. Like at Zendesk, I mean, obviously they started out as like help desk software, right? And they've grown multiple products. But I think one of the things that like they've had, many crossroads, like, well, do we, move into another segment or another persona? But they've like really like stayed the course on support and like, maybe different how support has evolved over the years. Like it can be like customer experience or success. And so I bet it's still like, there's a primary lane. And I actually think that's incredibly important because that it's really hard to be a lot of things for a lot of people, and it really communicates like your company's vision for the future, right? So
you mentioned kind of support, that role changing over time. I think one thing that's interesting is that one way to think about revving your personas is that the product changes, and there's reasons that you might want to change, or you're launching a new product. But as you pointed out too, the market can change. Is there any, do you have any stories about kind of market changes that you're responding to in terms of kind of the finer points of the persona? No. Good. Homework for everyone in the room.
I mean, I think there's being at an older company, you can go back in history and rewind and see forks in the road, choices made and not made, right? And so I think that's interesting. I mean, that's less market changes and more just decisions that were made, and it set you on a path. I think to really unlock, I think it is focus, right, on a singular persona or indicators of this is the type of person that you're or group of people that you're really focused on. You have to earn the right to unlock more, right? You have to have a very good reason, and you have to sort of eyes wide open know that you're taking on all of this other stuff. And so are you launching effectively? Are you doing all the things to their maximum? The odds are you're probably not.
Yep.
Right? Odds are you're probably not ready, and you're trying to do too many things too fast. So
yeah, I think that's anyone familiar with Reify is that we it's kind of one of our core things is that you really need to earn your right to a second or more personas. And I'm sure we would all agree that there's a lot of work that follows a persona, right? It's not just the document, it's all the stuff you're going to do because you now have that market. How do you keep them fresh? I mean, do you do interviews on a recurring basis to kind of do that? Is there a set schedule? How do you think about evolving them over time?
I mean, for us, we have a sort of deep user base, lots of existing knowledge, both internally and externally. We're always talking to customers. Like, you can't do that enough. If you get locked in the sort of inside four walls thinking and echo, it's like it's not going to be productive. So it's like, how are you structured or unstructured? Like, what are you doing to continually validate like how people are using the products and how are they being successful? Also, why are they like almost not choosing you, right? Those customers that are going down that journey make a successful decision, but why did they almost not? Sharpen those areas, polish them.
And I think like trying to I'll just like keep saying my product thing, but like these are being used for product development in theory. So like refreshing them around a product like sprinting cycle, or when you're doing product planning, and it's like, okay, let's kind of look at our personas or user segments and like polish off, okay, what is our penetration in each of these? Are we actually, if we have a few of them, what are our growth rates? Like, what are some of the blockers? Do we think there are new segments? And I think bringing that structure and framing, like, do we want to go deeper in the existing segments we have with new products? Do we want to unlock new geographies? Do we want to unlock new customer types? And like, there are a lot of ways to grow, but bringing that framing and the new user knowledge, the new competitive context into product planning is like the best way, because then it's actually immediately being applied.
It's critical
throughout the company.
It's critical.
Yeah, that's a really cool exercise. I mean, I like that you brought up before too the jobs to be done framework. How do you think about how you're making these personas successful? Ultimately you're trying them to accomplish some kind of goal. So how do like sort of personas relate to that work?
I mean, like at the core of it for us, our main customer is really this like sort of ambitious, fast growth tech company that is whether they're big or they're already large, but they're ambitious and want to grow, or they're smaller and have already are on that kind of really fast growth path. So ultimately, if they choose Stripe, we're helping them grow, change their business model, grow globally, change pricing plans, and do that without even thinking about it, just with like a parameter of code. So for us, it's like not having to build more infrastructure to grow. Like, that is us doing our job, is letting kind of being the platform for our customers to do that.
I think if people aren't using it is probably a good way of measuring success. I think if you see people organically, like sales should be doing discovery to figure out like who's that person, what they care about, and then using like in personas or however way, or jobs, like there's a way of framing that. And then, if you're not having those conversations with product early on about like, okay, well, who is this for and what is it for? Then, yeah.
How do you know when they're not working so well? It seems like everyone obviously approaches this with the best intentions, and you talk to a lot of people. Maybe it's because of the market changing or whatever. Like, how can you kind of tell that the persona that you've developed isn't maybe the best fit?
Depends what like you're trying to do with it. Like, fit for what? Like, if it's an artifact that sits on a PowerPoint, like that, it doesn't really matter. Like, ultimately, the persona or thing that you've done works when like the company is rallying around making choices because of it, and it's like it is a guiding principle by which you organize all of your activities. So otherwise, if it's just shelf like slideware, it's a failure.
How do you build some of the, I almost want to say the word courage, to use these personas, because you are making choices. You're saying that we maybe don't care as much about this segment, right? We want to make sure that we're building product for this other one. So how do you make sure that it's used kind of as a knife in that way to kind of fix product, look at market, where you're spending money, that kind of thing?
Consistency in application. I mean, I think it's product marketing's job to keep bringing the tools to the table and make sure the conversations are being started and led with those tools. I mean, that's why I think frameworks are so critical, because one, if you're putting in place frameworks, ideally it makes everybody's job easier, right? Because everybody's using that framework to go make decisions, and man, that decision felt a lot easier because we had this template and we were referring back to this template and it fit inside there. And so we're all working together, you know, in a more fluid way. It's not a roadblock. It's not increasing friction. But product marketing is bringing that template, those tools, that framework as part of the conversation every time. It's going to be that consistency to seed that in the rest of the organization.
Yeah. Are there any techniques or metrics that you've used to kind of see, looking back, you know, are the customers that we're getting fitting the kind of persona that we think we're trying to bring in the door?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we look at that data.
Okay.
I mean, it's data in Salesforce. It's based on enriched data. It's based on feedback from the sales team.
Yeah, I mean, we capture that even just in the sign-up
Yeah.
phases, or you can use Clearbit to enrich your sign-ups.
Yeah,
right,
looking at
to
front-end
figure out.
prospect info, right? Even just who's coming into the funnel.
Yep. Yeah, are there other metrics that you guys have in terms of like trying to capture just this persona, or how you're growing? You know, does the persona show up, I guess, in some of the metrics that you guys track? I guess that's probably the only one, right? Just sort of like percent fit, maybe something like that. That's interesting.
I mean, I think you can look at, you know, we were going through the funnel, like just look at different funnel metrics too. You can look at awareness metrics. If you have like some specific segments or personas, you can be doing big brand awareness, like unaided, aided awareness with this segment and this persona. So is all the top of funnel stuff working? And then you can look at your conversion for each of these and understand actually a lot of these types of customers were coming through the door, then we're losing them.
Exactly.
And they're not converting, so what's going on? And then like lower funnel retention, who are our lovers and our referrers and our evangelists, and understanding that, and then overall just understanding your penetration. What's the TAM for each of these customer segments? Where are you penetrating? How are you growing? So like you should be running your business against kind of, I think, across the funnel and all your metrics aligned against your target customer segment.
If you, whether it's a new product launch or something, you guys have each of you been in a situation where you've kind of created this new persona. You know, what is the sort of next several steps that you do once you've kind of gotten this put together? You know, you're sort of right about on the precipice of doing this. So what do you think about after the persona is developed?
Well, I think Tanya kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's definitely not necessarily me coming to the table with like, here you go, everyone. I did all this research. Here are these personas. It's really like throughout the process, like I would hope to involve like product sales, like our CEO, our head of products, right? It's like everyone needs to be bought in actually throughout the process. So actually when it's finalized, I quote, it's not really finalized, people are already bought in and they're using it, right? And so it's like people are using it, and you learn actually to see how people react to it and use it. You would hope they start using actually before it's finalized, because then you can make it even better. But I would imagine, you know, like working with sales to figure out like, yes, these are our main personas, like our designers, heads of design, but you know, they probably need to struggle. They have to figure out how to navigate the whole purchase flow, right? Which is not necessarily, doesn't only involve just the designer. Could be like a procurement person or an IT person. So how helping them like navigate that and be, you know, being able to speak to those different people. I think that would be like a win for me. You know, for product to have, you know, a clear vision of, okay, like this is like, you know, who we want to. I mean, designers are interesting because they know the products like really, really well already. So it's really like, okay, well, what do they want actually in the future, and how do we get there? So I would say like, you know, and that requires like me working super closely with product, because it's really even not just what they need today. It's like what we think they need tomorrow. And so,
that's really cool. So we have only like a few minutes left, so I'm going to go just down at the end of the couch and back. You know, there's a lot of folks in the room that are founders of companies, first marketers, really trying to grow their business. What are just, you know, a few seconds of advice that you would give them as they think about product marketing?
Yeah, so I think as I touched on it a little bit, like growth, product, and product marketing in the beginning are basically the same thing. So if you have multiple people doing those jobs, have them just be together at all times, talking to your addicted people, talking to the churners who you thought wouldn't be, getting to the essence of why you're winning and why you're not. And just running growth experiments too, because it's if you can use things like AdWords or Facebook ads or whatever to test different types of value props too, so that even if the product's not there, you can use growth marketing to help test what is resonating with people, and then feed that, if you have a bunch of hypotheses, right, into your product roadmap. So I think trying to get those teams basically be working as one unit of building the what is the what, and how do we get that customer, and what's the motion, what's the sales motion, is critical.
How about you?
I'm super passionate, at all stages, about do your little grid, 4x4 grid. One row, it's fears to what they want at the most individual level, right? I'm afraid of being fired, right? I aspire to be promoted, down at that core, not the company messaging, not broad-based product messaging, but down at the individual. And what are they frustrated about, and what are you helping them achieve? What do they want? And then distill that down to 3 things in each quadrant, and then blow that out 3 different ways for each of those. So logical argument. Can you tell me it a way with numbers? 80% of people choose blah 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 because of blah blah blah, right? Tell it to me in a gain way, how do I achieve something with this? Or tell me in a loss avoidance way, how do I how do I avoid something, right? I think doing it that way helps you really distill down and focus on what do people want to achieve with your product.
That's cool. Any last words of advice?
Sure. Final tips. I guess if you don't have customers, what do you do?
Yeah. Talk to a lot of people.
Yeah, or even I was gonna say maybe even looking at competitors, worthy competitors or complementary products that you want to attach yourself to. Those are amazing cues of who you may want to go after and how you want to talk to them. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody.